I still remember the sound it made when it shattered. Not just the wood splintering or the strings snapping, but the way my entire world seemed to crack open in that single, violent moment. The guitar that had been my voice, my escape, my only piece of myself that felt real, was now scattered across the stained carpet of that suffocating apartment in pieces, too small to ever put back together. And standing over me, breathing hard with that sick satisfaction in his eyes, was Robert, my stepfather, the man who had spent the last 8 years convincing me that I owed him everything, that my talent belonged to him, that I was nothing more than a tool for his entertainment and his ego. Blood dripped down my forehead, warm and sticky, mixing with the tears I refused to let fall. My 7-year-old brother Mason was screaming from the doorway, and all I could think was that I should have left years ago. I should have taken Mason and run the first time Robert made me perform for his drunk friends at 2 in the morning. I should have known better than to believe that family meant anything to people who only saw you as currency. If you have ever felt trapped in a relationship where your worth was measured by what you could give rather than who you were, stay with me. This story is for you. And if it resonates, please hit that like button. Subscribe for more real stories of survival and triumph. And leave a comment telling me about your own journey to freedom. Your story matters too. Let me take you back to where it all began. 6 years before that guitar shattered, and my old life ended. I was 14 when my mom married Robert. She died 2 years later in a car accident, leaving me and Mason with a man who saw us as investments rather than children. Robert was a middle management wannabe who had never achieved anything meaningful in his life. But he had discovered that having a musically talented stepdaughter gave him social capital. Suddenly, he was the interesting guy at parties, the man with connections, the father figure who was cultivating young talent, except he was none of those things. He was a puppeteer, and I was too young and too desperate for family to see the strings. It started small. He would ask me to play at his office parties. Then it became demands to perform for his friends when they came over. No matter what time it was or whether I had school the next day, my mom had enrolled me in a prestigious music program before she died, and I was good. Really good. By 16, I was writing my own songs, pouring all the grief and confusion of losing her into melodies that felt more honest than anything I could say out loud. Robert saw dollar signs. He started booking me for private events, pocketing the money and telling me it was going toward my college fund. College fund. That was the lie he told himself and everyone else. The truth was that every cent went to maintaining his lifestyle, his image, his pathetic attempts to seem more successful than he was. He drove a leased BMW he could not afford. He wore knockoff designer clothes. He took his girlfriend Eleanor and her daughter Chloe out to expensive restaurants while Mason and I ate ramen for the 4th night in a row. Eleanor moved in when I was 17. And if I thought things were bad before, I had no idea how much worse they could get. She was everything my mother was not. Cold, calculating, obsessed with appearances. She looked at me the same way Robert did, as a resource to be exploited. But she added a new dimension to the abuse. She was jealous. Her daughter Chloe was 18, beautiful in that Instagram-perfect way, and completely devoid of talent. Eleanor was convinced that Chloe was going to be a star, a model, une actrice, something, anything. The problem was that Chloe had the personality of wallpaper paste and the work ethic to match. Every audition ended in rejection. Every callback led nowhere. And somehow, in Eleanor's twisted logic, that was my fault. I remember the night Eleanor sat me down in the kitchen, her perfectly manicured nails clicking against the cheap laminate table. Robert was out, and Mason was asleep. She smiled at me, but it did not reach her eyes. "You know, Savannah," she said, her voice saccharine sweet. "You are so lucky to have Robert. He has given you every opportunity. The least you could do is show some gratitude." I had been performing 6 nights a week at that point, turning over every cent to Robert while working a part-time job at a coffee shop just to afford strings for my guitar. Gratitude was not the word I would have chosen. "I am grateful," I said quietly, because I had learned that arguing only made things worse. "Then maybe you could help Chloe," she continued. "Introduce her to some of your music contacts. Put in a good word for her. You have been so selfish, keeping all these connections to yourself." Selfish. That word echoed in my head for days. I was selfish for not wanting to share the few genuine relationships I had built in the local music scene. Selfish for wanting something that was mine, untainted by Robert's manipulation. Selfish for existing in a way that inadvertently highlighted Chloe's lack of substance. The abuse was not always loud. Most of the time, it was quiet, insidious, the kind that made you question your own perception of reality. Robert would book me for performances without asking, then get angry when I had conflicts with school or my coffee shop shifts. Eleanor would make comments about my weight, my clothes, my hair, always framed as concern. You would be so pretty if you just tried harder. Chloe would walk into my room without knocking, borrow my things without asking, and then act wounded when I asked for them back. And through it all, there was Mason. Sweet, innocent Mason, who was too young to fully understand what was happening but old enough to feel the tension crackling through our home like static electricity. I became his shield, his caretaker, the only stable thing in his life. When Robert yelled, I put myself between them. When there was not enough food, I gave Mason my portion. When he had nightmares about Mom, I held him until he fell back asleep. Taking care of Mason gave me purpose. But it also trapped me. Every time I thought about leaving, I looked at his face and knew I could not abandon him to these people. By the time I turned 20, I was a ghost. I went through the motions, performed when commanded, worked my shifts at the coffee shop, and came home to an apartment that felt like a prison. My music, which had once been my salvation, had become another form of bondage. I could not play without thinking about who would try to profit from it. I could not write without wondering if Robert would find the songs and claim ownership of them. The guitar Robert eventually destroyed was not even technically mine. It had been my mother's, the one she played when I was little, singing me lullabies about mockingbirds and diamond rings. It was the last piece of her I had left, and I held onto it with a desperation that probably looked pathetic to anyone watching. But it was mine. It was real. It was proof that I had once been loved without conditions. The months leading up to that final night were suffocating. Robert's demands escalated. He had befriended a supposed investor, some guy named Danny, who talked big about funding a record label and discovering the next big thing. Robert became obsessed with the idea of managing my career, of finally achieving success through me that he had never earned himself. He started talking about me quitting my job, quitting school, dedicating myself full-time to music under his guidance. I need you focused, he would say, cigarette dangling from his lips, filling the apartment with smoke that made my eyes burn. Danny is ready to invest, but only if you commit. This is your shot. Our shot. Our shot. As if he had anything to do with the hours I spent practicing, the calluses on my fingertips, the songs I bled onto paper in the middle of the night when the world was finally quiet enough to hear myself think. I knew what he was not saying. He had promised Danny a performance, a private showcase with me as the main attraction, playing for free, while Robert played the role of the magnanimous mentor. He had probably already spent money he did not have, banking on this investment that would never materialize because Danny was likely as much of a con artist as Robert himself. I told him no. It was the first time I had ever directly refused him, and the word felt foreign in my mouth. Sharp and dangerous. We were in the apartment. Late afternoon, light filtering through the dirty windows. Mason was at a friend's house. A rare moment of normalcy in his chaotic life. I was sitting on the couch, tuning my guitar, trying to find some peace in the ritual. Robert walked in with that entitled swagger he always had, as if the world owed him something. You need to be at Danny's place Saturday night, he said. 8 o'clock sharp. Dress nice. Professional. I cannot, I said, not looking up from the tuning pegs. I have a shift at the coffee shop. Call in sick. No. The room went cold. I could feel his anger building. That particular quality of rage that came from being told no by someone he viewed as property. What did you just say to me? I finally looked up, met his eyes. I said no. I am not performing for your friend. I am not your puppet anymore. His face turned red, veins bulging in his neck. You ungrateful little brat. After everything I have done for you, I took you in when your mother died. I fed you. I gave you a home. You exploited me. I said, my voice shaking but steady. "You have been stealing my earnings for years. You have never done anything for me that did not benefit you first." That was when he moved. Fast. Violent. His hand reaching for the guitar before I could react. He yanked it from my hands, and for a moment, we struggled. Me trying to hold on to this last piece of my mother. Him determined to take even that from me. "You think you are special," he spat. "You think you are some kind of artist. You are a tool. You are a means to an end. And you will do what I tell you to do because you are nothing without this family." Mason's scream cut through the apartment. He had come home early. Standing in the doorway, watching this nightmare unfold, I saw the terror in his eyes, and something inside me shifted. I was not just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for him. For his right to grow up without this toxicity, without learning that love meant control and family meant obligation. I yanked harder on the guitar. And Robert, in his rage, lifted it high above his head. For a split second, I thought he would back down, that some shred of humanity would make him realize what he was about to do. I was wrong. The guitar came down on my head with a force that sent me to my knees. The world went white, then red, pain exploding through my skull. I heard the wood crack, felt the strings snap against my skin, tasted blood in my mouth. When my vision cleared, I was on the floor, Mason sobbing and trying to reach me, and the guitar was in pieces around us. Robert stood there, breathing hard, his face a mask of fury and something else. Fear. Maybe. The realization that he had finally gone too far. Eleanor and Chloe appeared in the doorway. I waited for concern, for horror, for any normal human reaction to seeing someone bleeding on the floor surrounded by the wreckage of violence. Instead, Eleanor sighed, like I had just spilled wine on the carpet. "What did you do now?" "Savannah?" she asked. Exasperated. "You always have to make everything dramatic." Chloe smirked. "Serves you right? Maybe now you will stop acting like you are better than everyone else." I looked at each of them, at these people who were supposed to be my family, and I felt nothing. No anger, no hurt, just a cold, crystalline clarity. They would never change. They would never see me as a person. And if I stayed one more day, they would destroy what little of myself I had left. I stood up, ignoring the blood dripping down my face, the throbbing pain in my head. I took Mason's hand, and I walked into my room. I had been planning this for weeks, a small part of me knowing it would eventually come to this. My suitcase was packed, hidden in the back of my closet. What little money I had saved from my coffee shop tips was in an envelope taped under my dresser. I grabbed both, took one last look at the room where I had spent the worst years of my life, and walked out. I did not say goodbye. I did not explain. I just left, Mason's hand tight in mine, the shattered guitar left behind like a declaration of war. The first night, we stayed in a motel that smelled like mildew and broken dreams. It was $40 a night, more than I could afford, but I needed space to think, to plan, to figure out what came next. Mason fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from crying. I sat on the edge of the stained mattress. Ice from the machine down the hall pressed against my head, and I let myself acknowledge the magnitude of what I had just done. I was 20 years old with a high school diploma, a part-time job, and a 7-year-old brother who was now my responsibility. I had no family support, no safety net, no plan beyond getting away. The smart thing, the reasonable thing, would have been to go back, to apologize, to make myself small and useful again until I could save enough to leave properly. But I had spent 6 years being smart and reasonable, and all it had gotten me was blood on my face and splinters of my mother's guitar under my fingernails. I took out my phone and looked at the pieces of the guitar I had photographed before we left. It was evidence, documentation of what they had done, but it was also a reminder. They had tried to destroy me, to break me down into something manageable and controllable. And they had failed. I thought about my mother, about the woman who had played that guitar and sung to me about hope and resilience. What would she think of me now? Would she be proud that I finally stood up for myself, or would she be disappointed that it took me so long? The next morning, I started over. I found us a room above an auto repair shop in a grittier part of town. It was $250 a month, utilities included. And the owner, a gruff man named Joe who had more tattoos than teeth, did not ask questions when I paid him in cash. The place was tiny, just one room with a hot plate and a bathroom down the hall. But it was ours. No one could take it away. No one could use it to control us. I picked up more shifts at the coffee shop and started doing DoorDash deliveries in the evenings after Mason went to bed. Joe's wife, Maria, a kind woman who brought us tamales on Sundays, would watch Mason for me. I was exhausted, running on 4 hours of sleep and too much caffeine, but I was free. That counted for something. The hardest part was not the work or the money or the exhaustion. It was the silence. For years, my life had been filled with Robert's demands, Eleanor's criticisms, Chloe's complaints. Now, in this small room above an auto shop, there was just Mason's breathing and the sound of my own thoughts. I had to figure out who I was without them, without the constant push and pull of their expectations. Music was still there, lurking in the corners of my mind. Melodies I could not quite shake, but I could not play. The sight of guitars in shop windows made my stomach turn. The memory of that night was too fresh. Too Rav. Mason asked about it once. He was sitting on our second-hand mattress, coloring in a book Maria had given him. "Savannah," he said quietly, "do you miss your guitar?" I did not know how to explain that I missed what it represented more than the instrument itself. I missed feeling like I had something that was mine, something that could not be taken away. But it had been taken away, shattered along with the illusion that family meant safety. Sometimes, I told him honestly, but we are going to be okay without it. He nodded, accepting this in the way children do, with a trust that made my chest ache. He believed me, and that meant I had to believe it too. 3 weeks after we left, I was walking past a pawn shop on my way to a delivery. In the window, half hidden behind a tangle of other instruments, was an acoustic guitar. It was old, worn, the finish dull and scratched. Nothing special, but it was whole, and it was calling to me. I had $40 in my pocket, money that should have gone to groceries or saved for next month's rent. But I walked into that pawn shop, and I bought that guitar. That night, after Mason was asleep, I took it out and held it. My hands remembered the shape, the weight, the way the strings felt under my fingertips. I played a single chord, and the sound filled our tiny room. Rough and imperfect, but real. I started playing again. Not for Robert or his friends or some imaginary investor, just for me. I played the songs I had written years ago, the ones about grief and loss. I wrote new ones about rage and liberation. My fingers were clumsy at first, out of practice, but muscle memory kicked in. The calluses came back. The music returned. I recorded rough demos on my phone, one song at a time. Late at night, when the auto shop below was finally quiet, the quality was terrible. Just my voice and guitar with the hum of the refrigerator in the background. But there was something raw in those recordings. Something honest that I had never been able to capture when I was performing on command. I started sending them out. Not to big labels or famous producers. Just to local venues. Small bars. Coffee shops with open mic nights. Most ignored me. Some sans polite rejection. But then I got a response from a place called The Echo, a tiny indie bar in the Arts District. The owner, Marcus, called me himself. He was probably in his 40s, with a voice that sounded like he had spent too many years around cigarettes and whiskey. "Your demo," he said without preamble. "It is rough, really rough. But there is something there. Something real. Most of the people who send me demos are technically perfect and completely soulless. You are the opposite." I did not know what to say. No one had ever described my music that way before. "Come play Thursday night," he continued. 9 o'clock. It is just an open mic, so do not expect much. But if you are half as good live as you are on this recording, we will talk. I played that Thursday night. Mason sat in the back, doing homework at a corner table while Maria watched him. The crowd was small, maybe 15 people nursing drinks, and not really paying attention. I got on stage with my pawn shop guitar, and I played. I do not remember much about that first performance. I was terrified, shaking so hard I almost could not hold the guitar. But once I started playing, something took over. All the fear, all the anger, all the hurt I had been carrying for years poured out through the music. I sang about being broken and rebuilding, about cutting away toxicity and learning to breathe again. When I finished, the bar was quiet. Then Marcus started clapping, and slowly, the rest of the room joined in. It was not a standing ovation or anything dramatic. Just genuine appreciation from people who had actually listened. Marcus found me after. As I was packing up my guitar, "You are playing every Thursday," he said. $50 a night to start. Sell some merch, and you keep whatever you make. Deal. I stared at him, waiting for the catch. For the moment when he would reveal that this came with strings attached, with expectations and obligations. He just waited. Pacient. Deal, I said finally. That was the beginning. I played every Thursday at the Echo. And slowly, people started coming specifically to see me. Not huge crowds. Just a few dozen people who appreciated music that felt real. I burned my songs onto CDs using Maria's ancient computer. Designed the covers myself with Sharpie and printer paper. Each CD was $5. And I sold them after every show. The money was not much, but it was mine. Money I earned playing music I chose. For people who actually wanted to hear it, I started putting it away, building something that felt like a future. In the meantime, Robert's world was falling apart. I heard about it through fragments. Through the grapevine of mutual acquaintances I had not realized we shared. His investor friend Danny had disappeared, probably off to con someone else. Without me to show off. Robert's thin veneer of success crumbled. His friends stopped inviting him to parties. His coworkers saw through his inflated stories. Eleanor's family, who had always thought he was a joke, started saying it out loud. Chloe failed another audition. And another. And another. Without me there to blame. Eleanor had to confront the reality that her daughter was aggressively mediocre and unwilling to work for anything. The resentment between them grew. I did not take pleasure in their suffering. Exactly. But I did feel a grim satisfaction in knowing that I had been holding that family together. And now that I was gone, they were revealing themselves for what they really were. 2 months into my residency at the Echo, Robert found me. I was outside the bar after my set, loading my guitar into the beat-up Honda Civic I had bought for $500. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to find him standing there, looking smaller than I remembered. He had aged badly in those 2 months. His face was drawn, eyes bloodshot, clothes rumpled. He looked like a man who had been drinking more than sleeping. "Savannah," he said, and his voice cracked. "I need to talk to you." I waited, guitar case clutched in my hands like a shield. "I need your help," he continued. "Danny," he came back. "He wants to invest. But only if you perform at this event he is hosting. It is big. Savannah, this could change everything. For both of us." I studied him. This man who had controlled my life for so long, I saw the manipulation in his eyes. The calculated vulnerability designed to make me feel guilty. But I also saw the desperation. He really did need me. His entire identity had been built on the illusion that he was my mentor, my manager, my creator. Without me, he was nothing. "No," I said simply. His face twisted. "Savannah, please. I'm sorry about what happened. I lost my temper. But we are family. Family helps each other. You destroyed my mother's guitar," I said, my voice calm. "You hit me in the head with it. You stole from me for years. You made my life hell. And now you want me to help you. I made you," he insisted, that old arrogance creeping back into his voice. "Without me, you would be nobody. You owe me. I do not owe you anything," I said. "And I am not nobody. I am finally somebody. Because I got away from you." I got into my car and drove away, leaving him standing in the parking lot. In my rearview mirror, I watched him get smaller and smaller until he disappeared. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, they all showed up at the auto shop. Robert, Eleanor, and Chloe, standing outside the metal stairs that led to my room. Mason and I were coming back from the grocery store, and the sight of them made me freeze. "We need to talk," Robert said. trying to sound reasonable. As a family, we are not a family, I said, Mason's hand tight in mine. Eleanor stepped forward, her voice sharp. You are being incredibly selfish. Savannah, after everything Robert did for you, you just abandon us, leave us to deal with the mess. What mess? I asked. The mess of your own failures. That is not my problem. Chloe laughed. Bitter and mean. You think you are so special now. Playing your little songs at a dive bar. You are nothing. Savannah, you always were. I looked at the three of them, and I felt that same cold clarity from the night I left. They were never going to change. They were never going to acknowledge what they had done, and I was never going to let them back into my life. Wait here, I said, and I went upstairs, leaving Mason with Joe, who had appeared from the shop below. Sensing trouble, I had prepared for this moment. After Robert showed up at the Echo, I knew they would not leave me alone. So I had done something I never thought I would have to do. I contacted a legal aid clinic, met with a lawyer named Sarah, who specialized in cases like mine. She helped me file for a restraining order against all three of them, documenting the abuse, the financial exploitation, the assault. I came back down with 3 sets of papers and handed them out like party invitations. These are restraining orders, I said. You are not allowed to contact me. You are not allowed to come to my home or my workplace. If you do, you will be arrested. Robert's face went white. You cannot do this. I already did, I said. You took everything from me that you could. My childhood, my earnings, my mother's guitar. The one thing you cannot take is my future. That belongs to me now. Eleanor lunged forward like she wanted to hit me, but Joe stepped between us. His tattooed arms crossed. I think you folks need to leave, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You are making a mistake. Eleanor hissed. You will regret this. The only thing I regret, I said, is not doing it sooner. They left, hurling insults and threats. I stood there, shaking, watching them go. Mason came up beside me and took my hand. Are they gone for real? He asked. Yeah, I said. They are gone for real. The next 3 months were hard in different ways. Robert and Eleanor tried to circumvent the restraining order, calling from different numbers, having relatives reach out, spreading rumors in our old neighborhood, but I did not engage. Every violation, I documented and reported. Eventually, they realized I was serious. The calls stopped. The messages dried up. My gigs at the Echo grew. Marcus started booking me for weekend slots, not just Thursday nights. Other venues heard about me and started reaching out. I played at coffee shops, at small festivals, at house concerts in cramped living rooms where everyone sat on the floor and listened like music was a prayer. I met other musicians, real ones who created because they had to, not because someone told them to. They became my community, my support system. We traded gigs and advice and encouragement. When I had a bad night, they reminded me why I was doing this. When I had a good night, they celebrated with me like my success was theirs too. Mason thrived. Without the constant tension of Robert's household, he became lighter, happier. He made friends at his new school. He joined the art club. He drew pictures of the two of us, just me and him, and put them up on the walls of our tiny room. And slowly, painfully, I started to heal. I went to therapy, free sessions through a community clinic. I talked about the abuse, the manipulation, the guilt I still carried for not leaving sooner. My therapist helped me understand that I had been a child when it started, powerless against adults who should have protected me. She helped me forgive myself. 6 months after that night when Robert shattered my guitar, I got an email that changed everything. It was from a booking agent who had seen me play at a local festival. She represented a moderately successful indie rock band that was going on tour, and they needed an opening act for their East Coast leg. The pay was real, the contract was legitimate, and most importantly, it was mine. No one was taking advantage of me. No one was exploiting my talent. It was just an opportunity, offered fairly, with respect for my worth. I said yes. The day before the tour started, I went to a music store, a real one, with walls of guitars and employees who actually knew what they were talking about. I had been saving every extra dollar, and I finally had enough. I bought a guitar, brand new, midnight blue with a finish that caught the light. It cost more than 2 months of rent, but it was worth it. That night, I played at the Echo one last time before leaving for tour. The room was packed, people standing in the back because all the tables were full. Mason was in the front row, waving at me. Marcus was behind the bar, grinning like a proud parent. My new guitar hung across my shoulders. Solid, and real, and mine. I do not remember what I said before I played. Something about gratitude, about new beginnings, about the people who had supported me when I had nothing. Then I launched into my set, and the room disappeared. It was just me and the music, the way it was always supposed to be. When I finished, the applause was deafening. I looked out at the faces of people who had chosen to be there, who had paid to hear me play, and I felt something I had not felt in years. Pride. Not the hollow, performative pride of being useful to someone else, but genuine a pride in myself, in what I had built from nothing. After the show, Marcus pulled me aside and handed me an envelope. It was thicker than usual. "What is this?" I asked. "You're cut from the door," he said, "and a little extra. Consider it an investment in your future. You are going to do great things." "Kid." I hugged him, this man who had given me a chance when no one else would. And I tried not to cry. The tour was everything I hoped it would be and more. I played in cities I had only read about, for crowds that started small but grew as word spread. The headlining band treated me like a colleague, not a subordinate. They shared their knowledge, introduced me to industry people, invited me to sound checks, and after parties where I actually felt welcome. And every night, before I went on stage, I thought about Robert and Eleanor and Chloe. I thought about how they had tried to convince me that I was nothing without them, that my worth was contingent on my usefulness to their egos. And then I stepped into the spotlight. I played my music, heard the applause of strangers who appreciated my art, and I knew they had been wrong about everything. Revenge was not about making them suffer. Revenge was not about proving anything to them. Revenge was taking away their power to hurt me. It was building a life so full and meaningful that they became irrelevant. It was succeeding on my own terms, in my own way, without needing their approval or permission. 3 months into the tour, my phone rang with a number I did not recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Savannah." It was Eleanor's voice, strained and artificial. "We need to talk. Chloe is getting married, and she wants you at the wedding. Family should be together for important moments." I almost laughed. After everything, they still thought they could manipulate me with guilt and obligation. "I am not coming," I said calmly. "And do not call this number again." "But we are family," she insisted. "No," I said. "You were people I was forced to live with. Family is what I have now. Family is the people who support me without expecting anything in return. That was never you." I hung up and blocked the number, and I did not feel guilty. I felt free. The final show of the tour was in Boston, at a venue that held 300 people. It sold out. 300 people paid money to see me. This girl from nowhere, with a pawnshop guitar and songs about surviving. I walked on stage, looked out at the sea of faces, and I remembered the first time Robert made me perform for his drunk friends. How small I had felt, how powerless. Now, I was standing on a stage because I earned it, because I was good enough, because I had value that existed independent of anyone else's opinion. I played my heart out that night. Every song was a declaration, every note a testament to survival. When I finished, the crowd was on their feet, cheering, chanting for an encore. I gave them 3. After the show, the headlining band's manager approached me with a proposal. They wanted to keep me on for their next tour. Bigger venues, better pay, and more than that, they wanted to help me record a proper album. It connected me with producers and labels that aligned with my vision. I accepted, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Mason flew out to see the final show. His first time on a plane, he sat in the front row, eyes wide with wonder, watching his big sister do the impossible. After, he ran up on stage and hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "You did it," he whispered. You really did it. We did it. I corrected, because none of this would have meant anything if I had left him behind. He was my purpose, my reminder of what I was fighting for. And now we were both free. That night, standing in a Boston hotel room that I paid for with my own money, looking at the city lights through the window, I thought about how far I had come. From a girl who believed she was only valuable if she was useful, to a woman who understood her worth was inherent. From someone who accepted crumbs and called it love, to someone who demanded respect and walked away when it was not given. The guitar Robert destroyed was never coming back, but I did not need it anymore. I had built something new, something that could not be taken away because it existed inside me. My music, my strength, my refusal to settle for less than I deserved. And that, I realized, was the greatest revenge of all. Not making them pay for what they did, but refusing to let it define me. Not seeking their apology, but creating a life so full they became a footnote. Not needing them to acknowledge my worth, but knowing it myself, I picked up my new guitar, the one I bought with my own money, and I played. The notes filled the hotel room, strong and clear and utterly mine. This was my sound now. Not the sound of breaking, but the sound of building, the sound of a life reclaimed, a future earned, a self discovered, and it was beautiful. Freedom is not given, it is taken, carefully and deliberately, by people brave enough to walk away from toxicity even when it wears the mask of family. Healing is not linear. It is messy and painful and worth every single moment of discomfort. And success, real success, is not measured by fame or fortune. It is measured by the ability to wake up each morning and recognize the person staring back at you in the mirror, to know that you are living authentically, on your own terms, answerable only to yourself. The tour ended, but my career did not. I recorded that album, working with producers who respected my vision and treated me like a partner, not a product. The songs were raw and honest, chronicling the journey from captivity to freedom. I wrote about Robert and Eleanor and Chloe, not with bitterness but with clarity. I wrote about Mason and Marcus and Maria, about the people who had shown me what real support looked like. And I wrote about myself, about learning to be enough. The album did not top any charts or go viral, but it found the people who needed it. I got messages from listeners who heard their own stories in my lyrics, who felt less alone because someone had put words to their pain. That meant more than any commercial success ever could. A year after I left that suffocating apartment, Mason and I moved into a real place. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with actual counter space, windows that let in natural light. It was modest, nothing fancy, but it was ours. No one could take it away. No one had power over us there. I hung my new guitar on the wall, a piece of art and a reminder. Mason hung his drawings next to it. We painted the living room a warm yellow that made everything feel hopeful. We bought furniture from thrift stores and made it our own. Every piece, every choice, was ours. Mason started therapy too, working through the trauma of growing up in that environment. He had nightmares sometimes, woke up crying about Robert and the yelling and the fear. But slowly, those nightmares became less frequent. He started sleeping through the night. He started smiling more easily, laughing without looking over his shoulder to see who might get angry. We built traditions, just the 2 of us. Saturday morning pancakes, Sunday afternoon walks, movie nights where we would make popcorn and pile blankets on the couch. Simple things that became sacred because they were ours, untainted by expectation or manipulation. I kept playing shows, building my career 1 gig at a time. Some venues were bigger than others, some paid better than others, but every single one was mine. Negotiated fairly, performed willingly. I learned to advocate for myself, to recognize when someone was trying to take advantage, to walk away from opportunities that felt wrong. Marcus became a mentor and friend, someone I could call when I was doubting myself or navigating the complicated waters of the music industry. He never asked for anything in return, never expected me to owe him. He just supported me because he believed in my talent and wanted to see me succeed. Maria remained our unofficial grandmother, bringing us food and wisdom in equal measure. She had survived her own abusive marriage years ago, and she recognized what I was going through. She never pushed me to talk about it. But when I was ready, she listened. And she reminded me that surviving was not the same as thriving, that I deserved both. 2 years after I left, I was playing a festival in Nashville when I saw them. Robert and Eleanor and Chloe, standing at the edge of the crowd. They had not changed much. Maybe a little older, a little more worn down by their own toxicity, but still the same people who had tried to break me. My first instinct was panic. The old fear rose up, that familiar voice telling me I was not safe, that they would find a way to hurt me again. But then I looked around at the stage I was standing on, the crowd of people who had paid to hear me play, the life I had built from nothing. And I realized they had no power here. I played my set like they were not there. I poured everything into the music, every ounce of passion and pain and triumph. I played the song I wrote about that night, like about the guitar shattering, and the moment I decided I was done being a victim, the crowd loved it, singing along to the chorus about reclaiming your life. When I finished, they were gone. I do not know if they stayed for the whole set or left early. I do not know what they thought or felt, and I realized, with a freedom that felt like flying, that I did not care. After the show, I called Mason. He was staying with Maria while I was on the road, and I needed to hear his voice. They were here. I told him, Robert and Eleanor and Chloe. At the festival, there was a long pause. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice tight with worry. "I am," I said, and I meant it. I really am. They cannot hurt us anymore. Mason, we are safe. I know, he said quietly. You made us safe. We made us safe. I corrected. By choosing each other, by refusing to accept their version of family, that night, alone in another hotel room in another city, I thought about forgiveness. Not the kind of forgiveness that required reconciliation or pretending the abuse never happened, but the kind that meant releasing the hold they had on my emotional life, refusing to let them rent space in my head anymore. I did not forgive them for what they did. I forgave myself for staying as long as I did, for believing their lies, for thinking I deserved that treatment. I forgave the girl I used to be, scared and alone, and desperate for approval. She did the best she could with what she knew, and I made a promise to myself. I would never again accept less than I deserved. Not in relationships, not in my career, not in any aspect of my life. I would surround myself with people who lifted me up, not tore me down. I would set boundaries and enforce them. I would choose myself. Every single time. 3 years after leaving, I was offered a residency at a prestigious music venue in New York. A month-long engagement, playing to sold-out crowds every night. The pay was life-changing. Enough to finally give Mason and me real financial security. But more than that, it was validation. Proof that I had made it. Not because of anyone else. But despite them, opening night, I stood backstage, my guitar in hand, listening to the crowd file in. Mason was out there somewhere, sitting with Maria and Marcus, who had both flown in for the occasion. My chosen family, the people who had earned that title through love and support and showing up. The stage manager gave me the signal, and I walked out to thunderous applause. The lights were bright, the crowd was enormous, and for just a second, I was that terrified 14-year-old girl again, performing because she was told to, not because she wanted to. But then I played the first chord, and everything shifted. This was not that, this was mine. My stage, my music, my choice. Every person in that audience was there because they wanted to hear what I had to say, not because someone forced them to listen. I opened with a new song. One I had just finished writing. It was about metamorphosis, about the painful process of becoming yourself, about shedding skins that no longer fit and learning to exist in your own truth. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word, and I felt something I had been chasing for years, not validation from others, but genuine connection, the knowledge that my story mattered, that my voice had value, that my existence was enough. During the bridge, I looked out at the sea of faces and I saw myself reflected back. People who had survived their own hells and come out the other side. People who understood that strength is not about never breaking, but about how you put yourself back together. People who knew that the best revenge is not destruction, but creation. Building something so beautiful that the people who tried to destroy you become irrelevant. I finished the residency to standing ovations every night. Music critics called my performance raw and authentic, praising the emotional honesty of my work, but the reviews that mattered most were the messages I received from listeners. From the woman who left her abusive husband after hearing my music and realizing she deserved better. From the man who reconciled with his estranged daughter and learned to set healthy boundaries. From the teenager who stood up to their controlling parents and started living for themselves. My pain, my survival, my story. It was helping other people find their own strength. And that made everything I had been through worth it. Mason graduated high school with honors and a full scholarship to art school. We celebrated in our little apartment. Just the two of us, eating takeout and laughing about how far we had come. He was not that scared 7-year-old anymore. He was confident, talented, sure of himself. In a way I was still learning to be. You saved me, he said that night, out of nowhere. When I was a kid, you saved me. I looked at him, this beautiful human who had survived so much and turned out so good, and I shook my head. We saved each other. I said, you gave me a reason to keep going when I wanted to give up. You reminded me what love without conditions looked like. He hugged me, and for a moment, we were back in that terrible apartment, clinging to each other while everything fell apart around us. But this time, we were safe. This time, we had won. I never heard from Robert, Eleanor, or Chloe again. I do not know what happened to them. If they ever acknowledged what they did. If they ever changed. And I realized, with a peace that took years to find, that I did not need to know. Their story was separate from mine now. They were characters in my past, not factors in my future. Sometimes I thought about that guitar, the one Robert destroyed. I wondered where the pieces ended up. If they were thrown away, or gathering dust in some corner of that apartment. It had been my mother's. My last connection to her, and losing it had felt like losing her all over again. But I came to understand that my mother was not in that guitar. She was in the songs I wrote, the strength I found, the way I loved Mason fiercely and without condition. She was in every choice I made to protect myself, to value myself, to refuse to settle. She would have been proud of the woman I became, not because of my success, but because I survived with my humanity intact 5 years after I walked out of that apartment with nothing but a suitcase and my brother's hand in mine. I was invited to perform at a gala for a nonprofit that supported survivors of domestic abuse. I almost said no, worried that I was not qualified, that my story was not significant enough. But then I remembered all the years I spent minimizing my own pain, telling myself others had it worse, that I did not deserve to take up space. So I said yes, and I told my story. Standing on that stage in front of hundreds of people, I told them about Robert and the broken guitar, and the moment I decided I was done. I told them about the fear and the struggle and the slow, painful process of rebuilding. And I told them about the other side, about the life I created from nothing, about the freedom that came from refusing to be a victim anymore. When I finished, the room was silent. Then, one by one, people stood up. Some were crying. Some were nodding with recognition. All of them understood. And in that moment, I knew this was what I was meant to do. Not just make music, but tell the truth. Give voice to the experiences that people kept hidden out of shame or fear. Remind survivors that they were not alone, that healing was possible, that the people who hurt them did not get to write the ending of their story. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. People lined up afterward to share their own stories, to thank me for my courage, to tell me that hearing my journey gave them hope for their own. A young woman, probably 19 or 20, grabbed my hand and whispered that she was leaving her abusive boyfriend that night, that my story had given her the strength she needed. I thought about that girl often in the months that followed. I hoped she made it out. I hoped she found her own Marcus and Maria and Sarah. I hoped she built a life that made her proud. And I hoped that someday she would tell her story and give someone else the courage to leave. Because that is how we break the cycle. Not by staying silent out of shame or fear of judgment, but by speaking our truth and refusing to let abusers maintain their power through secrecy, by naming the manipulation, the exploitation, the casual cruelty that so often hides behind the word family. by redefining what family means, claiming it for the people who earn it rather than the people who demand it by virtue of biology or circumstance. Today, I am 27 years old. I have released 3 albums, played hundreds of shows, built a career that sustains me financially and fulfills me creatively. I have a apartment that I own, not rent, with enough space for Mason to visit whenever he wants. I have friendships that nourish me, professional relationships built on mutual respect, and a life that feels authentically mine. But more than any of that, I have peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you survived something that was meant to destroy you. The kind of peace that comes from setting boundaries and watching them hold. The kind of peace that comes from choosing yourself again and again, until it becomes second nature. I still play my guitar every day, not because anyone tells me to, but because I want to. Because music is how I process the world, how I connect with others, how I remind myself that I am alive and whole and free. My fingers fly across the strings with confidence now, no longer hesitant or apologetic. I play like I deserve to take up space, because I finally believe that I do. The scar on my forehead, where Robert hit me with that guitar, is still visible, if you know to look for it. I used to try to hide it with my hair, ashamed of what it represented. Now I wear it openly. It is proof that I survived, evidence that I am stronger than the people who tried to break me, a reminder that every wound eventually becomes a scar, and scars are just stories our bodies tell. Some people ask if I would do anything differently, if I would have left sooner or handled things another way. The truth is, I did the best I could with the tools and knowledge I had at the time. I stayed because I was conditioned to believe that love meant sacrifice, that family was everything, that I owed them my loyalty, regardless of how they treated me. I left when I was ready, when the pain of staying finally exceeded the fear of leaving, and that is what I want people to understand. There is no perfect timeline for healing, no right way to escape abuse, no ideal version of survival. You leave when you can. You heal at your own pace. You rebuild according to your own blueprint. Anyone who judges you for that has never had to claw their way out of toxicity with nothing but stubborn hope and the belief that you deserve better. Robert was wrong about everything. I was not a tool or a means to an end. I was not nothing without him. My talent did not belong to him. My success was not because of him, and my worth was never contingent on his approval. I was always enough, even when I could not see it. Even when everyone around me tried to convince me otherwise. Eleanor was wrong too. Setting boundaries was not selfish. Walking away was not abandonment. Choosing myself was not betrayal. It was survival. It was self-respect. It was the most loving thing I could have done for myself and for Mason. And Chloe, bitter, jealous Chloe, was wrong most of all. I was not nothing. I was everything I needed to be. And the success I found had nothing to do with luck or connections or being in the right place at the right time. It was because I worked harder than I ever had to, poured every ounce of my pain and passion into my art, and refused to give up, even when giving up would have been easier. The best revenge was not making them suffer. The best revenge was proving that I did not need them, that I could not only survive but thrive without their presence in my life. The best revenge was taking away their power to define me, to limit me, to make me small. The best revenge was becoming exactly who I was meant to be, loud and proud and unapologetically myself. So here I am, on the other side of the nightmare, living a life I once thought was impossible, playing music that matters, raising a brother who is kind and creative and whole, surrounded by people who love me for who I am rather than what I can do for them. I am not perfect. I still have hard days, moments when the old wounds ache, times when I doubt myself or struggle with trust. Healing is not a destination, but a journey, and I am still walking it, but I am free. And that freedom, hard-won and fiercely protected, is worth more than any amount of money, any measure of fame, any external validation. It is the foundation on which I have built everything else, the bedrock that cannot be shaken by anyone's opinion or disapproval. To anyone reading this who is still trapped in a toxic relationship, who is making excuses for people who hurt them, who is sacrificing their well-being for the comfort of others, I want you to know something. You deserve better. Not someday, Not if you change or improve or become more palatable. Right now, exactly as you are. You deserve respect and kindness and love without conditions. Leaving is hard. It might be the hardest thing you ever do. You will doubt yourself. Feel guilty. Wonder if you are making a mistake. People will try to pull you back. Will use your compassion against you. We will tell you that family means forgiving everything. But family, real family, does not abuse you. Real love does not demand that you set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. And you owe nothing to people who have consistently shown you that your pain does not matter to them. The life you want exists on the other side of that fear. The version of yourself you are meant to become is waiting for you to be brave enough to walk away from what is destroying you. And I promise you, from someone who has been there and survived, it is worth it. Every difficult moment, every scary decision, every uncertain step into the unknown. It is all worth it, because you are worth it. Your peace is worth protecting. Your dreams are worth pursuing. Your story is worth living on your own terms. So what about you? Have you ever had to walk away from someone who was supposed to love you? Have you ever chosen yourself even when it felt impossible? Have you ever rebuilt your life from nothing and discovered that you were stronger than you ever knew? Drop your story in the comments below. Let's build a community of survivors who refuse to be victims, who know that our worth is inherent, who understand that the best revenge is a life well lived. And if this story resonated with you, if it gave you courage or hope, or just made you feel less alone, hit that like button. Subscribe, so you never miss another story of survival and triumph. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because our stories have power, and sharing them might be exactly what someone needs to take that first terrifying step toward freedom. Remember, you are not what they said you were. You are not the sum of your traumas or the product of their manipulation. You are a survivor, a varior, a person of infinite worth and possibility. And your story is just beginning.